He was humiliated, rejected, and almost killed, but this kitten won't forget. He's about to embark on a journey of vengeance that no one will ever forget. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking the narrow alley where little Tigrino lay, his small body trembling. The cold bit at his tiny frame, but it couldn't compare to the pain in his heart. Just moments ago, his so-called friends had betrayed him in the worst way imaginable. They had promised him a fun night out, a little adventure, but instead, they led him into the alley where they all laughed at him, beat him up, and left him for dead. His soft fur, once fluffy and clean, was now matted with dirt and blood. His wide eyes, full of tears, stared blankly ahead as the rain masked his silent sobs. But through the pain, something else sparked inside Tigrino, a fire. He would never forget this. He promised himself that one day, somehow, he would make them pay for what they had done. The night of betrayal haunted Tigrino for years. It wasn't just the physical pain that broke him, it was the humiliation. The ones who hurt him weren't strangers, they were his closest friends. Cats he had grown up with, shared meals with, played in the sun with. He trusted them, and they tossed him away like garbage. He was just a kitten then, small and fragile, easy to push around. But something changed that night. After they left him in that alley, Tigrino had to drag himself back to his little corner of the world, bruised, bleeding, but alive. He was too young to understand why they did what they did. Why did Snarl, the leader, turn on him so suddenly? Why did Patches and Scar, who had once treated him like a brother, stand by and laugh? The confusion tore at him for days, months, and eventually years. But as he grew, so did his resolve. Tigrino wasn't the small, weak kitten he once was. No, he had grown into a strong, fierce cat, his muscles hard from years of training, his mind sharp with cleverness. He had never forgotten what they did to him, and now it was time to make them pay. Every time he saw their faces in his memories, a chill ran down his spine, but it was soon replaced by a burning anger. He spent years carefully crafting his plan, learning everything he could about their lives, their weaknesses, their fears. Snarl, the greedy leader who once bragged about being unbeatable, was now fat and lazy, running a small deli downtown. Patches, always nervous and jumpy, had become a cab driver, forever twitching and checking his rearview mirror. And Scar, the meanest of them all, lived in a mansion on the hill, surrounded by wealth and luxury, thinking he had left the past behind him. But Tigrino hadn't forgotten. He knew where they lived, what they valued most, and what would hurt them. The betrayal of that rainy night was about to come full circle. His plan was ready, and his heart was filled with a dark determination. Tigrino's plan was in motion. He didn't rush into revenge blindly. He knew patience was key. Every step had to be calculated, every move precise. His first target was Snarl, the leader of the group who had betrayed him. Snarl had grown complacent over the years, spending his days counting money at his deli, never suspecting that the kitten he once tormented was coming for him. Dressed in a sleek, fitted black jacket that made him almost invisible in the night, Tigrino watched from a distance as Snarl locked up his shop late one evening. The rain started to fall lightly, reminding Tigrino of that fateful night years ago. His heart pounded, but not with fear, with anticipation. As Snarl stepped into his car, Tigrino struck. He had tampered with the brakes earlier that day, ensuring that Snarl wouldn't make it far. Sure enough, as Snarl sped down the street, the car skidded out of control. It smashed into a fire hydrant, the front crumpling like a tin can. Tigrino watched as Snarl stumbled out, dazed and confused, but alive. The message had been sent. Tigrino was back, and this was just the beginning. Next was Patches, the jittery cab driver. He was always on edge, constantly looking over his shoulder, as if he knew someone might be out to get him. Tigrino had been watching Patches for weeks, learning his routine, waiting for the perfect moment. One rainy evening, Tigrino slipped into the back seat of Patches' cab, his eyes sharp, his voice calm. "Take me to the old alley by the docks," Tigrino said, his words sending an immediate chill through Patches. The alley, where everything had gone wrong. Patches hesitated, his paws trembling on the steering wheel. What? Patches stammered, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror, but all he saw was Tigrino's cold, steady gaze. "Drive," Tigrino commanded, his voice low, full of menace. Patches obeyed, his heart racing. When they arrived at the alley, Tigriño leaned forward, his voice a soft whisper that sent shivers down Patch's spine. "You thought I'd forget? I never do." Before Patches could react, Tigriño slipped out of the car, disappearing into the shadows. Patches, too scared to even leave his cab, sat frozen, haunted by the words Tigriño had left him with. His life was no longer his own. He knew Tigriño was watching, waiting. But the final showdown was with Scar, the cruelest of them all. Scar had been the one to deal the hardest blow that night. He had kicked Tigriño when he was down, sneering as he did it. Now Scar lived in a mansion high up on the hill, far from the struggles of the alley, enjoying a life of luxury. Tigriño knew Scar thought he was untouchable. For weeks, Tigriño watched Scar from a distance, planning his approach. The night finally came when Scar hosted a lavish party at his mansion. Tigriño slipped in unnoticed, dressed in a sharp suit that made him blend in with the wealthy crowd. As the night wore on and the guests grew drunker, Tigriño made his move. He cornered Scar in his private study, the flickering fire casting eerie shadows on the walls. Scar barely had time to react before Tigriño grabbed him by the collar, pushing him against the wall. Scar's eyes widened in shock, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. "You remember me, don't you?" Tigriño hissed, his voice cold, almost emotionless. "You should have finished the job that night." Scar's face paled as recognition dawned. He stuttered, trying to form an excuse, but Tigriño wasn't interested in his words. He was interested in revenge. Tigriño's grip tightened, his eyes blazing with the fury he had kept bottled up for years. "This is for everything you did to me. You thought you could just walk away, live your life, and forget about me?" Scar, trembling now, tried to push Tigriño away, but the years of living a soft, luxurious life had made him weak. Tigriño, strong and full of rage, was relentless. The confrontation was brief but intense. Tigriño didn't end Scar's life. No, that would be too easy. Instead, he left him a broken, quivering shell of a cat, one who would never forget the terror Tigriño had brought back into his life. Tigriño walked out of Scar's mansion as silently as he had entered, his mission almost complete. His heart raced with a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. He had gotten his revenge, but deep down, he wondered if it would ever truly be enough. Tigriño stood outside Scar's mansion, the cold night air swirling around him as he stared up at the towering building. He had done it. He had faced them all. Snarl, broken and humiliated, Patches, left trembling and paranoid. And now Scar, reduced to a scared, helpless cat, hiding in his own home. But something gnawed at Tigriño's heart. He had waited years for this moment, for the sweet taste of revenge. Yet, as he stood there, the satisfaction wasn't as sweet as he had imagined. The rain began to fall, lightly at first, then harder, soaking his fur. It reminded him of that night, the night everything changed. He could still feel the coldness of the alley, hear the mocking laughter, the sting of their betrayal. It was all supposed to end here, his revenge complete, his enemies destroyed. But instead of feeling triumphant, Tigriño felt empty. He thought back to Scar's face, the terror in his eyes as he realized who Tigriño was. The way he begged, pleading for mercy when he had shown none. Tigriño's heart had been set on making them feel the pain he had carried for so long. But now that it was done, what was left? The fire that had burned so brightly within him was dimming, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Still, he couldn't turn back now. There was one last thing to do. As he began to walk away from the mansion, Tigriño heard a voice behind him. He turned to see Scar stumbling out of his front door, his fur matted with sweat, eyes wide with desperation. "Wait," Scar called out, his voice shaking. "Tigriño, please, don't leave. Let's talk. I'll give you whatever you want." Tigriño stopped but didn't turn around. He couldn't face Scar, not after everything. The anger that had fueled him for so long had already begun to fade, leaving him confused, conflicted. Was this what he really wanted? To destroy Scar completely, to watch him suffer just as he had suffered? Scar collapsed onto the steps of his mansion, gasping for breath. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for what we did. We were just dumb, trying to be tough. But I didn't mean it, Tigriño. I didn't mean for things to go that far." Tigriño clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms. His heart pounded, not with rage, but with something else. Something that scared him. Could Scar really be sorry? Could he have changed? Or was this just another lie, another trick to save his own skin? Scar's voice broke, barely a whisper now. Please, Tigreño, I don't want to live like this anymore. If you leave now, it'll never end. I'll live every day knowing you're out there, waiting to strike again. Tigreño turned slowly, locking eyes with Scar. In that moment, he saw not the arrogant, cruel cat who had kicked him when he was down, but a broken, pathetic figure. Scar wasn't a monster anymore. He was weak, just like Tigreño had once been. A flood of emotions rushed through Tigreño. His claws retracted, his body relaxing. He had spent years dreaming of this moment, the moment he would finally stand above Scar and feel victorious. But now, as he stood there, he realized something. Revenge wouldn't heal the wounds inside him. It wouldn't erase the pain of that night, or the years of anger and loneliness that followed. With a heavy sigh, Tigreño stepped forward, his face softening. He reached out a paw, helping Scar to his feet. Scar, shocked, looked at him with wide eyes. "Why?" Scar whispered, his voice hoarse. Tigreño looked at him, his eyes filled with a sadness he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "Because you're not worth it," he said softly. Scar's body sagged with relief, but Tigreño turned and walked away without another word. As the rain continued to fall, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind the mansion, the past, and the life of vengeance he had built for himself. He had won, but it wasn't the victory he had imagined. As Tigreño walked away from Scar's mansion, the rain drenched his fur, but he barely noticed. Each step felt heavier than the last. The revenge he had chased for so long had been within his grasp, but now that it was over, he felt lost. The anger that had driven him for years had vanished, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. He had imagined this moment so many times, the thrill of watching his enemies suffer, the satisfaction of making them pay for what they did. But standing in front of Scar, seeing the broken shell of the cat who once tormented him, Tigreño realized something important. Revenge didn't heal. It didn't take away the pain of that rainy night when he was left alone, abandoned by those he trusted. It didn't change the fact that he had lived with that hurt every day since. As Tigreño left the mansion behind, he didn't feel victorious. He felt tired. The weight of everything, his past, his anger, his actions, pressed down on him. He had gotten his revenge, but at what cost? The kittens who had betrayed him were shattered, but so was he. Revenge hadn't brought him peace. It had only deepened the scars. Tigreño found himself standing at the edge of the city, looking out at the vast world beyond. For the first time in years, he had no plan, no goal driving him forward. The fire inside him had burned out, and now he was left with a choice: continue down the path of vengeance, or walk away and find something new, something that could fill the emptiness inside him. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling slowly. The world felt open, uncertain. But as Tigreño stared out into the night, he knew one thing for sure: he was done with revenge. It hadn't saved him, and it never would. The past was behind him now, and whatever came next, he would face it with his head held high. Tigreño turned away from the city, stepping into the unknown, ready to find a new purpose, a new life. The scars would remain, but he was no longer defined by them. Tigreño's journey may have ended here, but what do you think lies ahead for him? Will he find peace, or will the scars of his past follow him forever? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss more emotional stories like this. We have plenty of heart-pounding tales coming up, and trust me, you won't want to miss them.